social media to, we all sell stuff at the end of the day. I would imagine we're all in the business of selling stuff. Who uses social media to get that message across to sell your stuff? Pretty much? Okay. Who could probably be doing it maybe a little better? Okay. All right. Probably more hands went up than maybe the second round. So I'm going to explain today the story of SAP and where we were maybe about 2.5 years ago, what we've learned, and share the best practices. And perhaps there's a couple things you can take away today. So good morning again. My name is Gerry Moran, and I'm the head of social media in North America. And I have the privilege of working with a great team, probably a team of 8 or so, to help get that message and help get that content across to a lot of people in North America, as we sell our software, as we sell solutions, as we sell solutions to help companies run better. So over the past 2.5 years or so, we've grown from a group of 1, which was me, to a group of 8. And to me, what that, I think that just says, what we have done. There's success there. We've been able to monetize what we do and move from kind of a hodgepodge of a network and using social media to distribute messages to monetize it in a way to take it from just messaging to say, hey, come to this event, or hey, come to this webinar, to really delivering a value proposition with content. And we've evolved even more as we look to 2014 at SAP to use social media as a set of rails to become a content destination of the new buyer journey. And in fact, we've even changed the titles of our members on our team, social media channel managers, to basically content strategists, and how do we work with the different marketers within our organization. So I want to share that with you today. A little bit about my background in 15 seconds. I've been at SAP for about 2 years. Prior to that, I've worked as a digital strategist on the agency side, larger agencies. Prior to that, I spent a lot of time at HBO, spent a lot of time at IKEA, and a couple of large brands. So a lot of great experience, and I've had my most fun here at SAP. So let's get to the story. So you'll see there's a train theme today, and that's what I want to do. I really want to tell the story in the context of a train, of a destination, because there's the new buyer journey. And the new buyer journey is a lot different than it was 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. People are just, gone are the days of people knocking on the door or using the telephone and getting through and being the first point of contact when someone has a problem to solve, a solution, a purchase to make. And I think we'd probably all be in agreement there. And so at SAP, what we took a look at is, how does that new buyer journey change the way that we do our business? And get that message across, and suddenly the message becomes content. So how do we put ourselves in front of that conversation with the customer to be at the right place, the right time, on the right channel? And content is key. And I think we've all seen enough tweets and LinkedIn posts and LinkedIn groups and blogs that are just terribly self-promotional. And we took a look at this new buyer journey and found that, and hopefully none of these statistics are a surprise to any of us here, but put together these 5 statistics, 89% of people start their purchase journey, their buyer journey, with search. Okay, well, so what does that mean? That means when they search, what's going to come up? Different sources of content. So how do we put ourselves, in front of that conversation with that content? 70% of people make some sort of decision before they ever walk through the door, pick up the phone, consider themselves a prospect. So how are they making their decision? Well, obviously they're reading content and they're becoming smart and they're making themselves smarter. For at any level, from the influencer, director, senior manager level to the VP level to the C-level person, no one walks into a sales situation blind. So they are really using content to help make that decision. They're leaning on social media too. So social media is becoming more and more of a force. Less and less of a force we find. Our web, as far as SAP goes, just the pure .com site and less of email. We're finding, open rates are in the single digits, click-through rates are even less, and that's push marketing. So this, the use of content and social, it's pull marketing, and it's working really well for us. 40% or so, here's a number, it could be 40, could be 50%, are leveraging community. So, once once I find some content, once I find my content, once I make some sort of decision, I'm further vetting that through communities, LinkedIn groups, private communities, things at SAP, SCN, a group that we have, or a community that we have at SAP. And then the last statistic that we look at is, you'll see we have different roles and responsibilities for our different social channels. And Twitter is a big part of our engine right now. And probably if I ask for, I'll ask for a raise of hands. Who uses Twitter? Are we tweeters here? Okay. Follow me? No, just self-promotion. It's played right into that really well. No, but we find that is a great amplification tool for us. But because people don't respond back, because people don't have a conversation, doesn't mean that they're not using it. They are consuming, and there's a couple statistics that are out there, could range from 90%, could range up to 98%, that Twitter is really used right now as a consumption tool. So it's a great way to get your content out there. So roll all these statistics up, and the new buyer journey is changing. And just like the people in the picture in the train on this slide, there's different people, and we have to figure out how to connect with each of these different people along that buyer journey. So let's get a little bit more about that. The big challenge we had at SAP, and probably we all have, is building a set of rails, and that's an analogy that we use a lot. Let's spend a year or 2 years building the rails so we can get the content out. So think of it like a subway map. Think of it like the map of the T, or think of it like the metro in DC, or I guess the subway system, which in Philly isn't great. I'm from Philly, but you need to connect things end to end, and you need a solid set of rails, because if these rails aren't really connected, you're not going to be able to get your content delivered to the right contact, at the right time. So it's all about investing in that set of rails. Well, what does that mean? In the beginning at SAP, we had 10 or so agencies all running our social media show and getting that message out, and that didn't work really well. So what we did, we essentially, I was going to say fire, but we got rid of all the agencies and moved moved the team in house. And with that, we set up, the rigor and the governance, the sort of roles and responsibilities, and a real formula to get those messages out. How do we use Twitter? How do we use Facebook? How do we LinkedIn? Started very small, so think of it a light rail system that maybe then expanded into a system that went coast to coast. And what's real important we found, and will evolve more into this because you have to take baby steps, you have to go step by step. We have a content conductor, really at least a content conductor approach, because if you don't have someone that manages the content from end to end, so think of it very simply. I have a campaign, I have an objective, and I need to get the message out. But if I have 4 people running the show, thinking about creating 4 types of content, spreading it on 4 types of channels, I just think that is certainly set up to be a train wreck. And I think we all want to avoid that. So looking at the end-to-end process, which we now do at SAP, we're part of the planning process. Content needs to have a seat at the table at the planning process. Quarterly basis, monthly basis, annual basis, whatever works. What are the goals? What are the objectives? What sort of content do we need to create? And how to get it out there. So this content conductor approach has proven valuable to us, will prove to be even more valuable next year. And this is something that if we were to coach other people, we would advise other people, take a hard look at this. This might be known as a touch point director, content conductor, whatever you want to call it. Put one person in charge, and that way you can really manage it from end to end. And then when you're building the rails, it's not about, hey, we did a lot of this at SAP. Hey, we need a Twitter account, and hey, we need a Facebook account. We need so many accounts. So before we start to build the rails, let's sit down and build a blueprint. What are the requirements? What is it we really need to do to get our content out there? What is our mission? What are our goals? So let's build out those requirements. And then once we build out those requirements of what we need, and then we determine, okay, we need LinkedIn, we need Twitter, we need some communities, we need a blogging presence, et cetera, et cetera. Let's establish the roles, responsibilities of each of the channels. So when we have content and when we have messaging, we don't want to say the same thing in the same way on each of the channels. So what we do and what we've done, we've been very successful with at SAP, is creating roles and responsibilities for each of these channels. And if you think of it that way, it becomes a great building block to your marketing mix. So we need to generate awareness, we need to drive demand gen, we need to accelerate the sales cycle. And this is a role that LinkedIn plays, and this is a role that Twitter plays. So you end up to being in a little bit of like kind of mixed media modeling or sort of media modeling. So think of it that way, and we've had a lot of success, making sure that each of these channels have different roles and responsibilities, but very clearly articulated. And it's also when you establish those roles and responsibilities, you need to evangelize it, and you really need to connect with the different marketers to make sure we are all singing from that same songbook when we get our messaging and our content out there. And it needs to be an end-to-end system. So just like the rails, you need to think about, okay, if I need to get from point A to point B, and I can't have a collection of tracks that are not connected, because that's what we want to do. We want to get a message, we want to get a holistic message out there. And then when we establish those roles and responsibilities, and we like to think of it, I like to think of it often as a set of gears. And if you look at 3 gears, where there might be social here, or no, let's look at it another way. Let's look at it at awareness, let's look at it at engagement, and we could look at it as actual conversion. And social media plays a big part in that sort of awareness and engagement part. And once we establish the roles and responsibilities of the channels and understand where it fits in that gears, that gear description of awareness and engagement, it's a lot easier to measure its effect. So where do blog page views come in? Where do retweets come in? Where do clicks come in? And we start to measure and learn the effect that social has and content has and messaging has on the ability to drive conversion. So at the end of the day, we're just worried about people coming through our door, coming to our site, picking up the phone, doing some sort of business with us, probably everybody in this room. And we're able to measure it each part of the way that content and social has on that awareness and engagement, because you can't have conversion unless you have awareness and engagement first. So, creating demand with content, and we like to look at it as awareness, demand, and conversion or sales acceleration. We are not in a business where immediately I read a tweet, I read a white paper, I look at an infographic, video, and I convert. That's just not going to happen. But what we do know, because of the new buyer journey, is that people are making decisions and not reaching out to us first. I think we all are in agreement with that. So we need to get in front of the conversation a little bit earlier. And we've had a lot of luck at SAP where if we look at content in 3 layers, and I'll use the mobility example. Not that I'm a mobility expert, but when I look at content creation in this way, it's depending where I am in the sales cycle and depending what persona I am. Am I a CMO, am I a CIO, whatever it might be. It's what is mobility? What does mobility mean to me? And then how SAP can help me with my mobility problem are really the sorts of content, sorts of messaging we want to get across. It's really messaging, not content at that point. What is the point we want to make? So we use those different stages to create content and answer those particular questions. So we create our content in persona-based and sales cycle-based. So we think of it that way. And that way, we're able to get ahead of the conversation. And if we're able to get ahead of the conversation with the right content on the right channel at the right time, we become a partner, and we do really well. We can help frame the decisions and really get people to look at us as not necessarily sellers, but solvers. And I think that's what content really does for us. If we're able to become that content destination on that new buyer journey, we truly are partners. We truly become solvers as opposed to sellers. Gone are the day of the slick salesperson or the slick sales approach. and content really will help feed those people at the top of the sales funnel for all of us. And when we do create content and we put content on those tracks, we really have to ask ourselves, and this is one of the best tricks I've ever picked up, as simple as it sounds, when I was on the agency side. I think this was when I worked with IMC Squared, was, hey, at the end of the day, what is it we want the customer to do? So, we've had a lot of luck with taking a step back and asking, well, that's great, we're going to have a campaign, we're going to have a webinar, we're going to create great content, we're going to be on Twitter. Well, that's great. Well, once that person reads it, what do we want them to do? Is it to read more content? Is it to click to register for something? So I would encourage everybody to think about that when you're putting together your end-to-end process using content. What is it that you really want that customer to do? And we want to map the content to the multiple touch points. So think of it like the different stops on a train station. That might be that might be persona, that might be sales cycle, and we want to map and roll up everything we do to the talking points, to the campaign. So we've had a lot of luck, and again, this might be content marketing 101, but we want to create content based on the campaign needs and the campaign goal. So everything's holistic. So think of it obviously as that red thread. And a lot of times we'll start at SAP with a sort of master collection of content. We're all familiar with the 18-page white paper, which is great. We all need that 18-page white paper because product marketing creates it and it establishes, hey, here's the blueprint of everything we want to say. So how do we take that 18-page white paper and then parse out an infographic, 3 blog posts, collection of tweets, LinkedIn messaging that we send to the sales force, we send to marketers to activate our own personal network. I mean, these are all the rails. And if you think of it that way, white paper doesn't really translate to the right message at the right time to the right audience on the right channel all the time. So how do I take that? One win we've had recently is taking those sorts of content, those sorts of assets, and developing social selling content. And I believe that's the next point I'm going to make. How do we turn this into content that our sellers can use and activate their own networks on LinkedIn or their Twitter network, and adjust the content based on content? I think that's officially a typo. So if you're reading in and reading ahead, I just don't. All right, so accelerating the sales cycle, which is really the last set of points I want to make today, and it's naturally down the sales funnel, and then we've sort of adopted a different take on the sales funnel at SAP, from that awareness to that engagement and consideration, and to the acceleration. And this is a little bit different. This is at the very end. So once we are on our customers and our prospects' radar. How do we use content? We can't keep on emailing people. We can't keep on just tweeting. Yes, obviously we try to gather our followers on our blogs and Twitter and our different LinkedIn groups. But this is more about how do we empower, how do we enable our sales force? And we'll call them social sellers. And we have a very interesting and robust program that's growing in 2014. A solid social selling strategy. What can we put in the hands of our sellers that they can help push the sales cycle along and accelerate the sales cycle? No, again, a tweet, a blog post will not close the deal, but it'll help close the deal. It'll help articulate an objection that a customer might have. It will add some sort of just different read on the situation, provide additional research that will help others make a decision. So we have a plan in place, and I would encourage everybody in the room that works with the sales force. My assumption is if we sell stuff, we also have people whose job is to really be sellers of that stuff. So how do we put content in their hands, and how do we repurpose that content in those hands, the hands of those people? And that'll help us become a part of that conversation at all parts of the sales cycle, truly help us partner and frame the opportunity. And that's a real interesting thing to think about. How do I use content to accelerate the sales cycle, to help that customer frame the problem, because if they're making decisions about what they need to do, they probably could use a little outside help, and not necessarily outside sales help, but outside consulting help. And content, whether it's whether it's your own content or other people's content, can really help frame that opportunity and help your customers make a really smart decision. So this is sort of the end of the the end of the rails, and we think of it as the hub. Think of it as the hub as I start to get my message out. And I'm at the very end, and that's where the social sellers are really going to come into play with their content. And as you get toward the end of the cycle, we find at SAP that, hey, I've made my decision, but it's like anybody else that has researched for a new SLO camera or a new bike or a new stereo. I've made my decision, but I'm going to spend the next day just doing some really solid research and seeing what are the reasons I should and shouldn't buy this a thing that I've made my decision on. And this is where our sellers can also use great content and deliver content to support that decision. Not necessarily all self-promotional, third party perhaps, but it's going to be some great content to pass on. So that is my shtick for today, and I look forward to your questions at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much.
Wait a second.
Okay, sure.
So I can't resist. I have one question before we move on. Yeah. So the position of a content conductor. Mm-hmm. So that's very interesting. But I have a couple of questions about that. One is, can you comment a little bit about where the relation between social and content, first of all, which you in a sense assumed through your presentation. Mm-hmm. But how does the content conductor manage both of those processes? And organizationally, how does that fit? And where did you fit it in SAP? Is that you? Is that somebody else? And how do you deal with cross-divisional kinds of issues? So maybe just comment a little bit about those
sure.
issues.
So I'm happy to step up.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So right now, the way the content conductor approaches, it's a team. I lead the team, and I have what we'll call two strategists below, and it's two and a half of us. There's a third person that is helping bake the structure together. But so where that fits in, we're in a plan. It's perfectly right now. So we're in the middle of 2014 planning, and sitting at the table where they're thinking, okay, here's your goals, here's your talking points. This is what you want people to do at the various sections of the sales cycle for what you're trying to sell, whether it's cloud, whether it's analytics, whether it's retail solutions, whatever it might be. So being at the table, we use this content conductor approach to ask the questions of, what is it you want the customer to do? What are your goals? And then we go back and we plan and we say, okay, based on what we know, the roles and responsibilities of the channels, the role and responsibility the content has to play, here's the recommendation that we come back with. And it might be, you need 3 always-on sorts of blogs, sort of evergreen blogs. You need a collection of promotional blogs. You need a collection of tweets. You need some videos. You need some slide shares. And so what the role of the content conductor does is make sure it's plugged in from end to end. And we take those decision-making process away from marketers, and we come back with a recommendation to say, based on what we've heard, this is what you need, because this will drive awareness, this will drive engagement, this will connect with influencers, and it's sort of a holistic approach. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, great.